The ancient faith for the modern world. This is Ancient Faith Radio.
Welcome to Live with the Lows with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Lows. My name is Father Nicholas Lowe. I'm the parish priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm so excited that you're joining us on this May 24th. Tonight, Roxanne has had some previous obligations, so she won't be with us, but God willing, she'll be with us next Tuesday evening. If you're new to Live with the Lows, it's a show that we hope marries both faith and psychology to really give you some practical steps that you can live with and live by in your walk of faith every single week. That's why we broadcast this show live every Tuesday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Before we get into a topic that I hope will just tug at your heart tonight, I do want to let you guys know to stay connected to us on our social media platforms. We are on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, Facebook, all under the headings of The Lows. And so if you're on social media, we encourage you, just go to The Lows, that's L-O-U-H-S, The Lows, and you can be part of our social media family. And if you're one of these people like us who love to receive daily words of encouragement and inspiration, we definitely encourage you to go to our website at thelows.com. Again, that's L-O-U-H-S.com. Click on that subscribe button, and all you have to do is simply put in your email address, and every morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, you're going to receive just a daily word of encouragement. And our intention and our hope with this is just to give us all something to just live by and live for all throughout our days and through our week. And so definitely take advantage of that. We also just wanted to let you guys know, if you're looking for some renewal in your walk of faith, we published a book several years ago, actually about a year and a half ago, called Renewing You, a Priest, a Psychologist, and a Plan. Basically, Roxanne and I just took 8 of the biggest topics that we see, both in confession and in ministry, as well as in her profession as a psychologist, and really just kind of tackled them from both a faith and psychology perspective. So if you're someone that's struggling really with your walk of faith right now, or if you're struggling with just unhealthy thoughts, or wondering, what it means to be in a healthy marriage or raising our children right, take a look at this book. It's something that we hope and pray will inspire and motivate you. And again, as you know, all of the proceeds from this book are going to people who are in need and outreach ministries that are so important to us. So let's get started. Throughout the Bible, one of the things that we hear time and time again is the importance of us sharing God's light with the world. In fact, I like to think of how Pascha was not just about Christ's resurrection. That was so important, obviously, the climax of what all took place on that Sunday morning, about Christ dying and rising so that we could live and have the promise of eternal life. But there also was this hope that we would carry Christ's light to this world. Why? Because we're living in a world, friends, that's so filled with darkness, a lot of doom and gloom. Let me just share with you some statistics that might just be helpful for all of us to remind ourselves with. Today, almost 20%, today 1 in 5 children are being bullied at school. That every 3.5 seconds, someone is dying of hunger. Today, 20% of our country is struggling with depression. Today, 20,000 children are dying of starvation. There's so much homelessness, so much despair that's going on in our world. And oftentimes, as we hear these statistics, we could say, wow, Father Nick, I hear what you're saying, and that tugs at my heart. I hear it, but oftentimes we simply hear it, but really don't do anything about it. Tonight, I'm so honored to have 2 very great people who are going to talk to us about a ministry that they have recently established that's called the Orthodox Volunteer Corps. It's a ministry simply aimed to making a difference in this world and capturing the youth of our world, the young adults of our world, to do just that, to go out and make a difference in this world. We're speaking tonight with Kyra Limberakis as well as Michael Sider-Rose. Let me tell you a little bit about them before you hear from them yourselves. Kyra Limberakis is the Chief Operating Officer for the Orthodox Volunteer Corps. She previously served as the director of the Crossroads Summer Institute, where she worked for 7 years. She's received her bachelor's degree from Villanova University and her master's of theological studies from the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry, where she focused her studies on youth and young adult ministry and the ministry of women in the church. In addition to working full-time ministry, Kyra has published articles on the topic of young women's faith formation. She's the granddaughter of an Orthodox priest, and she's committed to the education and ministry of young people for the future of our church. And Michael Sider-Rose, he is the CEO of Orthodox Volunteer Corps. He, too, has earned a degree and attended the University of Pittsburgh, where he earned a PhD in history. For the past 10 years, Michael has served and volunteered extensively with the Neighborhood Resilience Project, no stranger to our show, where we had Father Paul Abernathy on our show just several weeks ago talking about the tremendous work that the Neighborhood Resilience Project does. He serves on the board there, and in his spare time, Michael enjoys hiking, biking, reading, and sampling food from all around the globe. He has the great privilege of being married to Randy, Maria, and the father to Anna, Molly, Eliza, and Tobiah. I hope I'm pronouncing them all correctly. And so to Kyra and to Michael, welcome to Live with the Lows.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father.
Absolutely. So before we begin tonight's show, friends, we encourage you to call in, join the conversation. You can call us in at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And friends, we're also simultaneously broadcasting the show on our platforms, our social media platforms. So if you're on Facebook, go to the Lows right now. You can tune in and listen to us live. Or if you're on Ancient Faith's Facebook page, you'll be able to listen to it as well. So, Kyra, I want to kind of direct my question first to you and then to Michael afterwards. And just tell me a little bit about what inspires you so much about Orthodox Volunteer Corps. What speaks to you so much that you want to be part of this particular ministry?
Thank you for that question, Father. Well, when I was in college, as you heard in my bio, I went to Villanova University. I had several friends who our senior year started applying for programs like OVC, but in the Catholic tradition and in secular spaces. So I had friends who did the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. These were my friends who, like me, came from, a Christian background and had a desire to serve. As an Orthodox Christian, I was really interested in exploring an opportunity like that. I, wanted to take a year of my life, at least a year of my life, in, on the ground service work like my friends were going to do. But I had wanted it to be in the context of, Orthodox formation. And I looked around and I researched, and there was nothing of the sort. So I ended up just going straight on to graduate school. But for me, a program like this for the Orthodox Church is something that's been a dream of mine since that senior year of college, over 10 years ago now at this point. And so, for me, an opportunity for young adults to serve on the ground with vulnerable communities in a faith community is something that not only I wanted, but I have seen in my work over the years in Orthodox ministry and youth ministry. I've seen that amongst our young people. There's such a desire to serve. And so, today to be able to say, I was part of the group of people that helped bring this incredible opportunity to young adults is just such a blessing because, like I said, it's something that I had wanted to do when I was in college. So that's a little bit about, my personal connection to Orthodox Volunteer Corps.
It's so beautiful to hear what you're saying, Kyra, because I think, as we know statistically, and this is really across the board with all Christian churches, is that you have the 18 to 35, the young adults, as we typically refer to them as in this age group, that typically oftentimes will leave Christianity or leave the church or their church. I think the statistics are around 65%. And many of them really may not come back to the church. They kind of get involved in their education, postgraduate education, sometimes obviously marriage for some, and children. So there's this kind of, and then typically right around the mid to late 30s, some of them may come back. But I love how this particular ministry of OVC allows not only for us to do what Christ wants us to do. I mean, I oftentimes tell people that I think if we put a stethoscope up to the heartbeat, to the heart of Christ, it would be help others, help others, help others, because it's just so important for us to be doing that. And I love how this ministry really engages one of the more vulnerable groups that are within the Orthodox Church, within Christianity, to be honest with you, and really engages them to put their faith into an action. Michael, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. What inspires you, what motivates you, and really just motivates you to be part of something that's so special as OVC?
I resonate with Kyra's answer, and I would add two things to it. The first I would say is that for me, part of the story of why I do this is rooted in the tradition that my parents bequeathed to me, and so they were and they are people who are deeply faithful in their walk with Christ, and they have worked throughout their life to live lives of service, to embody in a very full way their faith. And so I grew up in Philadelphia. They were a part of a Christian community that was seeking to live out faith in a lower income interracial community in Philadelphia. Did that in just a variety of beautiful ways. There were struggles, but it was also a tremendous witness. And so that's part of the story for me. I want to, in whatever small way, carry on that tradition, one generation further. So that's part of it. The second thing I would say is that I spent the last dozen years or so of my career working at a leadership development organization. It was community-based organization here in Pittsburgh, where I live, and we had some of the top recent college graduates from across the country who would come into our program. And our commitment to them was that, if you give us 9 months, that's how long that program ran, that we could accelerate your leadership development. This was a secular context. And it was remarkable to see the growth of the folks in that program over the course of those 9 months, and then to see what they did afterwards in that program. Folks who started businesses and nonprofits, somebody who clerked recently for a Supreme Court justice. I mean, just really remarkable things that they did.
Right.
And as I did that work repeatedly, we would very quickly get to questions of meaning and purpose as we did leadership development that, for me, soon got to the point where I would say to the person, listen, the only way I can speak to that question is to speak about my faith, right? Because we're just getting to fundamental questions here. And generally people were, open to doing that. What I wanted, though, was I wanted the opportunity to give that level of formation, of holistic formation to Orthodox young adults. And so the opportunity to now be a part of this and to pour myself into Orthodox Volunteer Corps is a true gift.
I love that. If you're just joining us on Live with the Lows, we're speaking with Michael Sider-Rose. He's the CEO of Orthodox Volunteer Corps, along with Kyra Limberakis, who's the Chief Operations Officer. This ministry, friends, is a ministry geared to making a difference in this world and allowing the young adults to be the catalyst behind this. And it's not something that it's the Christianity that we oftentimes talk about in the church, where we actually get involved in the actual neighborhood. We get engaged with the people who are suffering the most. And so we invite you to call us tonight. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346 to speak with Michael or Kyra. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Getting back to what you were sharing, Michael, I couldn't help but think, of the beautiful Bible verse that St. Paul speaks about in the book of Ephesians, chapter 2, verses 10, really one of the most popular Bible verses, that speaks about how we are all God's masterpiece, created us anew in Christ Jesus. And I love how there's always the syntax and the comma that comes after that. We were created new in Christ Jesus, the resurrected Jesus. And it says, so that we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. And I think what we have to constantly be reminded of is that, yes, this particular ministry is geared towards making a difference in our community. And yes, young adults we're engaging them, especially in a very vulnerable age group within our church, within Christianity as a whole. But I think it speaks to a larger challenge that we all face, and that is that we're living in a world that's so focused on consumption rather than compassion, that we're hoarding instead of helping. And ministries like yours really kind of reset all of us to say, wait a minute, there is a dramatic need that God is telling us to, okay, not only did you just hear about the resurrection, you say Christ is risen, you say Christos anesti, or whatever, in whatever language that you're comfortable with, we proclaim it. But God is saying, okay, great that you're saying that, but do something about it. Like go out and do that. And what your organization does, Orthodox Volunteer Corps, does that. So, Michael, let me just ask you, what is, for our listeners tonight, what is Orthodox Volunteer Corps?
Yeah. So it is a ministry of holistic formation. And we do that with 4 key components: service, formation, community, and church. And those are all integrated. So I'll just say a word about each of them.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, this is it's a 10-month full-time program for young adults 21 to 29 years old. We're starting right here in Pittsburgh, and gradually our vision is to expand beyond. But thinking about those 4 pillars, the first is service. The way in which we actualize that is we recruit and then match young adults in the program with nonprofits in the city in which we're based. The young adults will then work at that nonprofit 4 days a week. So they will get both hands-on experience in direct service, and they will also get to understand the workings of a nonprofit and to figure out, how can I contribute to that nonprofit and how can I help to build capacity in that
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit. So there's development there, of the heart and of the hand and of the head. It's all a piece.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the service component, and 4 days a week for 10 months doing service. The next component is formation. And so every Friday, participants will break from that rhythm of doing their placement service to being in an all-day interactive seminar. That seminar has 2 main components. The first is about deepening the faith, right? It is an investment in young adults to help them develop in their faith. We will think a lot about, what is an Orthodox understanding of service, right? How
Mm-hmm.
can we understand ourselves in relation to God and then in relation to neighbor? How do we love God and love neighbor? And this is linked into the verse that you just had us think about from Ephesians. And so,
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, we can't separate love of God and love of neighbor. And it is
Right.
all a piece, right? And so this will be important in the formation in that seminar. And then the second piece is leadership development in the seminar, because what we're seeking to do is develop folks who are able, as they live out their faith and work in these nonprofits, to then do that in such a way that they can really seek to move the needle, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be effective in their work, right? And so that's a piece of the seminar. The
I
third
love that.
component is community. And
Mm-hmm.
so the core members, the OBC core members, is what we call the participants, they will live in community with one another. And we actually have a house in Pittsburgh that we've secured now, where they will, where the first
Mm.
cohort will live together. And it's a beautiful place that is it's really got like a Pittsburgh feel to it, which is
Mm-hmm.
lovely. And I think it's a great community, a thriving one. So they'll live in community with one another and do that hard but beautiful work of figuring out, how do we pray together? How do we share meals together? How do we love one another in the little things and in the bigger things of just being with one another in and out?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and finally, undergirding all of this is the fourth pillar, and that is the church. So engaging young adults with local parishes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Finding ways to make those connections happen in a way that is organic and that benefits the church and the core member, that we find we will be seeking to facilitate that, right? Working in conjunction with local priests and lay folks. And so that's the program in a nutshell.
I love that. I love the fact that we're looking at the whole person, and trying to develop that. Not only are we looking to impact the people that God has put in on our path, but also developing our own inner spirituality, our own inner wholeness. And so that's amazing. Kyra, how and why did the Orthodox Volunteer Corps form?
So back in September of 2019, there was a gathering of representatives from different Orthodox ministries across the country, all who in some way, shape, or form worked to address the crisis of homelessness. And in that gathering, it was kind of like a think tank on how can the Orthodox Church better respond to this crisis. There were several of us in the room, he said, who had already thought about this idea of a volunteer corps, who had either had personal experience with it or knew of other communities who have these programs. And we came to the table and said, well, okay, there are a lot of things that we can do to address homelessness, but what if we think long term? And what would it look like if we invested in young adults in such a way that they were formed into the types of Orthodox Christians who not only cared about issues like homelessness, but had on the ground experience working with these populations and could directly say, could say, I've had direct experience, and so it's coming from more of like a level place as opposed to, a top down experience, assuming what we think they need. And so this idea of a volunteer corps emerged, and several of us in the room were really excited about it. And the Assembly of Bishops from that point then commissioned a working group to begin developing and researching, what would it take to build an Orthodox volunteer corps? And, after 2 years of, volunteer efforts from representatives from Focus and the Neighborhood Resilience Project and Project Mexico and St. Basil Academy and OCMC, we pulled together and we, applied for a nonprofit status, and we presented to the Assembly of Bishops, and they officially granted us agency status. So that's kind of how it all came to be, starting back in September of 2019. But, the why emerged because many of us also saw that, there were three big things happening, right? We saw that young adults have a desire to serve. It's very clear this generation of young adults, they want to see, the crises of our world being addressed. They want to be part of the solution. So that's one thing. But then we also saw that the Orthodox tradition has an immense, wellspring of service. Like it is part of our calling as Christians to serve. And then the third piece was that, well, there are few formative opportunities for young adults in our church, beyond a young adult conference, which it's, so great to see that those are coming back, but those are, short term. These, more long-term investment opportunities are really lacking in the Orthodox Church. And so piecing all of those things together, that really helps fill part of our why. We want to provide that opportunity for them. We want to fulfill our call to serve and really invest in a population that is in dire need. So so those are some of the whys for Orthodox Volunteer Corps.
I love what you're both sharing with us, because I think as as I look out, you turn on the news, you see what's, you don't even need to just turn on the news, you go to the street corners and you see there's just a tremendous amount of homelessness. And not only just homelessness, but recognizing that it's so easy that in our world that we're living in to kind of just simply see it, but we don't do anything about it. And I really love the call to action that you're really providing for young adults, that we see this need that's going on in this world, because I think we can sometimes, especially in this country, we're so blessed to be in this country. We're so fortunate. I mean, having a show like this in parts of the world would be absolutely illegal. But to be able to have to be able to live in this country also brings with it a great deal of responsibility, and that we are called to be our brother's keeper. And oftentimes I tell people, one of the most often used themes throughout the scripture, and that Jesus preaches so much about, is being generous towards people. It's carrying each other's burdens. It's making a difference in this world. And so, again, we are speaking tonight with Michael Sider-Rose, who's the CEO of Orthodox Volunteer Corps, as well as Kyra Limberakis. She's the Chief Operations Officer for OVC. We're talking about how we make a difference, and specifically how young adults are having an opportunity now through this particular ministry to make a difference in this world. And so we invite you to join us in the conversation tonight. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. we do have a caller. Mary, welcome to Live with the Lows.
Hi. My question is regarding having, being in college and feeling like an outsider when trying to be a good Orthodox Christian, especially since there's there's no young community in the church, I feel, since a lot of people my age don't really go to church as much.
Maybe, Kyra, we can start out with you on this. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the young adults and what has been your experience in as a young adult. You're engaged in the church, but as Mary's sharing with us all that there's oftentimes an absence of young adults in the church. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And Mary, I just want to, thank you for calling in and sharing your experience. I can say, having worked with youth and young adults for 10 years now in the church, you are not alone. You are definitely not alone in feeling that sense of, isolation, especially during the college days of, being one of the few to continue to engage in the life of the church. So I just want to, thank you for, sharing your experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really depends on the context in many ways. I would like to say that I absolutely recognize that, that huge statistic of, 65% of young adults are leaving the church. And I think that that's very real. And I also have seen, and it might just be the position in which I've worked. I've seen young adults who are really trying. They go through programs like Crossroad, where I previously worked, or Orthodox Christian Fellowship, and they have these opportunities to connect with other Orthodox young adults, and it can really provide, a solid community for them. But it's still oftentimes those spaces, those folks that you connect with are across the country, right? They're not necessarily in your college or in the city that you're living in. And so I think that can really wear on people. And it can feel very tiring to feel that sense of isolation, like, oh, am I the only person in this? But I also think it's really critical to consider the ways in which, and this is something I talk about with young adults, consider the ways in which as Orthodox Christians, we can exist in the world and see others as just icons of Christ, so that no matter where we are, no matter whether or not a person is an Orthodox Christian or not, going to church on Sundays, that we are finding Christ in everything and in everyone. That can be sustaining, in addition to, our participation in the life of the church. And, the church is our lifeblood. Without that, we can't thrive. But what are the ways in which we can see God in all things? And I also think that, tapping into ministries and communities like Orthodox Volunteer Corps, if you're in college, even if your particular college doesn't have an OCF, an Orthodox Christian Fellowship, are there ways for you to, go on a real break trip, or go to college conference, or any of the young adult retreats and conferences that are now emerging? I'm seeing that is something that is, it's really on the rise these days, which has been beautiful to see, and many of them led by young adults themselves. So I think it's both end, right? I think there is absolutely a sense of, and you can look in many parishes and see that there aren't a lot of young adults, and there are a variety of reasons for that, which would be a whole podcast in and of itself. So I won't go down that road. But I also think I've personally had the privilege of, working with young adults, maybe like yourself, Mary, who really are trying, and they're just trying their best to stay engaged, and find some sense of community. And so I would just say, just keep trying to find that community. And as much as we're able to break down, us versus them mentalities, that might inhibit our ability to find community in any space that we're in, I would, encourage us to do that. For me, I went to a Catholic university for undergrad, and there were very few Orthodox Christians. But I found, tremendous friends and friends who shared similar values to me, and that was really important, and that really got me through. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place there. I hope I
I think
addressed your question.
Yeah, Mary. Yeah, how does that sound to you?
That sounds really helpful now that I think about it. Like, I feel like maybe if I did those things, like go to conferences or like try to reach out more, then I could feel the word of like the loneliness I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Michael, would you like to add anything to what you're hearing from Mary?
Only this, Mary, that I would invite you, if it works, at some point in your trajectory, to consider applying to Orthodox Volunteer Corps, because what you could have at OVC would be, a 10-month stretch where you are living in community with other young Orthodox Christians who are, where you seek to live out your faith in very tangible ways, where you seek to connect with local churches. And in that time, local parishes, in that time, you don't just have that experience, but what you seek to do is develop a way of being that you can continue to live then throughout your life. And
Mm-hmm.
if we are successful in this program, and of course, we're just building on other work that's already happening, in the church. Kyra mentioned other programs that are just tremendous. But if we're successful in this, there will be a growing alumni community over time who will stay connected and will continue to support one another as you continue to live out the faith. So
Mm-hmm.
there's another, I hope, hopeful word for you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary, so much. We thank you so much for calling in and love and just stay connected to us as well. Again, on our social media platforms at the Lows. And if you have any questions or just follow-up thoughts, please feel free to send us a little message and we'll get back with you as well. Okay. But thanks so much for calling in.
Okay. Thank you.
We invite you also to make a phone call if you'd like to speak to Michael or Kyra. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And we're also just broadcasting live on our social media platform. So feel free to share us just any comments or questions. We'll definitely get to them before the end of the show. Kyra, as you're hearing Mary, and obviously as you beautifully stated, Mary is not an anomaly. There are many, many young adults who feel the same way that she does, that loneliness, as she called it. And I think for a lot of people, especially during COVID, where we were so isolated, and we're seeing statistics now with young adults at almost every negative statistics, whether it be through depression, anxiety, issues of just the feelings of feeling withdrawal, disconnected. All of these statistics are reflecting are all at all-time highs. I think one of the things that we're struggling with is not only prior to COVID we would be talking about how important Orthodox Volunteer Corps is, but how much more important now, knowing what we're going through and knowing that, God willing, we're coming out of COVID, but the opportunity of being in a relationship in a community that helps to develop the whole person, that we're activating this truth that God has put on the inside of each and every one of our hearts to make a difference in this world, while at the same time growing in Christ and growing in fellowship with other people. But I just would love to hear, really from you and Michael, when you hear people, I'm sure you've heard many people just like Mary share those thoughts, how much more does it kind of just motivate you to say, this is why Orthodox Volunteer Corps is here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's it. And I'm so grateful that there are young adults who are calling into this show tonight and sharing their experience. I think that it's something I learned when I was at Crossroad, is that it's really important to not do ministry for young adults, but with young adults, and let our work be guided by, first and foremost, the Holy Spirit and the church, but their experiences and their questions. And I think for far too long, big questions about faith and purpose, and even about some of these major, social crises in our world and in our society, just go, people are afraid to engage them. And OVC is a space that welcomes that. And we want to talk about the why of homelessness, not just what can we do about it, but what does it mean?
Right.
What is going on in our communities that this is happening, so that we're not just working towards something that's going to be a band-aid solution, for
Exactly.
example. And so I think that it's really critical to hear their experiences, and then respond to them accordingly in a way that offers the best of what Orthodoxy has, to address whatever question I have. I think a lot about Saint Basil and the new Caesarea and what he did with his community. And it's like, the more young adults can know about what Saint Basil was doing to address, famine and poverty in his community, it's like, wow, if we have something to learn from him.
We have
There's
a
something that our
tradition.
tradition has to offer. The questions that young adults have today. And so I think that that's going to be a critical component of it, is drawing on our tradition, drawing on their stories, their questions, their experiences, and not being afraid to engage them. So that's something that's really motivates me, because for so long I've felt like, well, we hear so much about the call to love our neighbor. We hear so much from our tradition, from our scripture, about this service and our responsibility to others. But unfortunately, you don't see it as much lived in action.
Absolutely.
And we need more of that. And young adults see that. I think they see that missing piece, and they want the church to be, doing more, and living out that call. And so let's just walk with them in that journey and do it alongside them. That's what I think.
Michael, you mentioned earlier in the show about how the OVC Corps members will be serving at nonprofits during the program. Can you give us some examples of what those service placements will look like?
Sure. So one example is from someone who was on your show recently. So Father Paul Abernathy leads the Neighborhood Resilience Project here in Pittsburgh, and that will be one of the sites for placements. And so,
can you share with our listeners about the Neighborhood Resilience Project? Just tell us a little bit about what that is, so that just for any new listeners that may not be aware.
Yeah, so it's an Orthodox organization that works at trauma-informed community development, and so it's a recognition that Kyra mentioned. So what's happening with homelessness? Why do we have homeless? Why does someone get kicked out of an apartment, right? And then what happens then? The notion of trauma-informed community development is to say, let's think about human beings, right, as holistic people, right, and then think about the way in which trauma affects us in a number of different ways. So it is certainly traumatic to get kicked out of your apartment, right? It is certainly traumatic to see someone else gunned down on the street in front of you, but it is also traumatic to experience racism, right? It is also traumatic, right, to have an experience where you can't figure out how you're going to get your food for the next meal, right? It is also traumatic to have an awful school situation, right? You mentioned bullying earlier, or other. So understanding the person, right, and understanding the nature of trauma, and then how can we help to promote healing, right? And not just as folks who are, say, working at the Neighborhood Resilience Project, but to create communities of healing in the very places where there has been extreme forms of trauma. So in different ways, the Neighborhood Resilience Project addresses that, right? There's immediate needs providing for folks. There's a clinic, a health clinic. There are block by block community development projects. There's a trauma response vehicle that goes out to places where there has been violence. Just a number of different efforts to work at holistic healing in the community. So that's one place where folks will serve. Another example.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Sure. Another example is there's an organization that does homeless ministry in Pittsburgh, and again, very grassroots organization. And so that's one of the partners that we've got. Still another organization where a woman who experienced the effects of street violence herself. She lost one of her children to street violence, then started a program with youth in schools to create healing restorative justice circles. And she does some beautiful work and just has a beautiful heart herself. That's another organization that we'd be working with. There's an organization that is called the Pittsburgh Project that does after school programming for youth, as well as home repair projects for low-income folks throughout the city. That's another place that has applied. So there's an urban gardening venture that we're going to be a part of that's connected to a beautiful congregation that's in the Homewood neighborhood of our city. So a number of different organizations.
I just kind of want to build a little bit on your response. I know that the first cohort of OVC Corps members will begin in Pittsburgh this fall. But can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure, Kyra, why don't you take that one?
Okay, yeah, I was going to say.
Absolutely. So we have 6 amazing young adults, and it is so exciting for us to say that at this point. We had a tremendous number of applications come in, and it ended up being a very selective process. But we have 6 Orthodox young adults from across the country. Most of them are coming right out of college. They're graduating this May, and so they're around 21 to 22 years old. They come from Massachusetts and Tennessee, Oklahoma, Georgia, Montana, and Minnesota. All of them have experience in service. Some of them have, served for a summer at some of the focus centers. Some of them have, been volunteering at the Neighborhood Resilience Project or working at their local service nonprofit at their college. And so it's just been beautiful to see. And we had the chance to read their applications, and Michael and I interviewed each of them, and they each come with their own desire to serve and their own experiences, but all with this enthusiasm for being part of a faith community where they know the other people in the house and the community that they're going to be living in with OVC will also be doing this type of nonprofit work and have this desire to serve. They come from all different Orthodox jurisdictions, and I think what's so beautiful too is that they each have different. They come from schools where they're majoring in all sorts of different subjects, and I think that some are studying international relations or cognitive and behavioral science, communications, and biology, business management, and we truly believe at OVC that these young adults, if they intend to, after their year of service, go on to, work in the field of international relations or in business, that their experience of OVC and their experience of service will inform the way in which they engage, in best and, ethical business practices, or, the way that they, pursue medical school. And so for us, it's just so exciting to see that they come with this, common desire to serve, to be part of a faith community, to learn, to be challenged. But they each have different experiences and also different interests. And so we are just so excited for this first cohort, which is going to be starting in September. For those of you who are listening in, Orthodox Volunteer Corps is on Facebook and Instagram, and we have been highlighting each of our core members for the past couple of weeks, and we'll continue to do so. So if you want to get to know them, get to know their background, why they're excited about OVC, please follow us on those platforms, and you can actually hear from the young adults themselves why they want to do OVC.
So, Kyra, take us on a day in the fall, in the fall coming up, with what these core members would be doing. Like, what would it be a day in their life typically look like?
Sure. So, the first thing I'll say is that outside of the kind of the nuts and bolts of the program that Michael was sharing, so working at their nonprofit 4 days a week and 1 day in seminar, the rest of that time is really up to them to explore and determine as a community, right? This is an intentional community. And so I can't say for sure exactly what it would look like because we haven't formed this group yet, right? They haven't come together to decide, oh yeah, we're going to cook breakfast together every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or we're going to do Limbarakis on Friday nights together, or we're going to go to this church on this Sunday and that church on that Sunday. Like that's something that they're going to, we want them to have autonomy and agency to decide what their days will look like. But, the basic is that they will get themselves to their nonprofit. Each young adult receives a modest living stipend so that it can cover their transportation. Housing is covered, of course, but transportation and food will be provided for through this stipend. So they'll get to their job. Each nonprofit has a very specific job description. As Michael was referring to those nonprofits earlier. So they'll engage with their work. We have site supervisors who are ready to challenge them and help them engage these communities in the right way. And then when they come home, we hope that as part of their intentional community, this is our hope for them. But again, they have to decide it that they'll cook together, they'll clean and share responsibility, they'll pray together, and really form just a beautiful intentional community. So that is partly, what a day would look like.
Sure. Michael, I'd love to hear, the vision. I mean, in 5 years from now, where would you like to see OVC? I mean, how would it be operating? Where would it be? Just kind of take us into that vision that you guys have for OVC.
Yeah. So I'll say a couple different things. The first is what we've been describing so far is the full-time program for OVC. That is, someone comes, lives, in the city for 10 months, is full-time in the OVC program. We also have a vision to launch a part-time program. And so the first part is that in Pittsburgh, once we get established with this full-time program, we want to have a part-time program where folks who are maybe already working full-time, maybe they're in school full-time, but they want to engage still in service. They want to experience some of the curriculum that we're providing and want to have some sense of community, even if they're not living, in this house with the others. And so that part-time program will provide some of that. We'll do some of the seminars, say, on an evening or a Saturday, right? And give some episodic service opportunities. What we really like about the part-time program is that it can work in conjunction with the full-time program so that young adults can over time begin to design and execute innovative service endeavors, right? So the folks who are in the full-time program are experiencing a nonprofit, have connections on the ground, and can discern what would some episodic service endeavors look like that would really help to move the needle on whatever the issue is that the nonprofit is working on, right? And so they can have those connections, know what that might be. The folks in the part-time program will have a broader reach in the city, just because they could be a larger number of folks, right? And they've got their connections in terms of the jobs they're working, the schools they're at, and of course their parishes. So we think those two groups working together have real potential for young adults to really lead the way on again, designing and executing innovative service work. So that's what part of the vision. The second part, I would say, is that a gradual expansion over time to other cities. And we want to do that thoughtfully. We want to, when we expand, know that the conditions are in place for a good expansion, a good there's a strong base for the program there, right? And we want to be ready as an organization. But that is absolutely the vision. As we do that, then we see a real possibility for cohorts across cities to begin to connect with one another, cross-pollinate ideas, right? See how what it looks like to live a life of service in this city can be distinct from this city, but we learn from one another, right? Not only that, then, as we begin to get cohorts that have graduated, we really, really want to stay in touch with folks because our motto is serve for a year, prepare for a lifetime. And we really, really believe that it is not enough to have a 10-month program. We need to develop folks such that they can really live this out over a lifetime. And so we want to develop a robust alumni network, and then have those alumni connected to one another as they are after their year of service, beginning to put that into practice, right? What does it look like to do that when they go back into their home parishes or when they go into a job and they're no longer just living in this particular community, right? That is OVC. So that's some of the vision for the longer term.
So what would you say, or how can non-young adults, I know that I think that all of us still wish that we were young adults, but for those of us who are non-young adults, what are ways that we can help support this ministry. And Michael, if you could share with us just your thoughts on that, and then I'll get to Kyra after that.
Sure. So we think of three ways in which this can happen. The first is, please pray for us. The
Mm-hmm.
I used to work, I said earlier, in a secular organization, and now working for Orthodox Volunteer Corps, there are ways in which the responsibility that we have now is heightened, and I
Mm-hmm.
do this work with fear and trembling, right? Honestly, and so um, I genuinely covet your prayers. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first. Second, if you can help us to spread the word. This is a new organization, and the more that we can um, tell people about it, right, the more that folks will know, and that we can just begin to build it up, right? We believe in the work, and so if you can help us spread the word, and you can do that by going to our website, orthodoxvolunteercorps.org. All one word. As Kyra said, we're on social media: Facebook, Instagram. We got a YouTube channel. We'd love to have you check us out, and then spread that word. And we also, on our website, there's a link if you're interested in getting on our mailing list. And then finally, support us financially. And we had experience recently. I mean, there's just so many folks have come forward and contributed in lots of different ways, including financially. And so we're just grateful for that. One very quick story in that regard is, we had a congregation out west that just found us online. We had
Mm-hmm.
no connection to them before. Apparently, everybody on parish council went to the website. They were just um, really taken by what we were trying to do, and then the congregation just passed the plate one Sunday, and then they sent us this check out of the blue. I mean, it was just remarkable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's story after story of folks supporting, and we're so grateful. We're so grateful for that support.
I was very fortunate when I lived in Boston I did a doctorate program in pastoral counseling in the urban setting through Gordon Conwell Theological School. And I remember spending a great deal of time. Part of my requirements were to spend some time doing homeless ministry in Boston. And I'll never forget the tragic stories of people who, it's so easy for us to judge. I always tell people, we allow sometimes the thickness of our skin is only 1/16th of an inch, and sometimes we can allow that 1/16th of an inch to separate us from seeing people through the eyes that God sees them. And the stories that I'm sure that through your ministries, both of you, that have touched your hearts to hear how just the utter sadness, and you could see just the domino effect of just how sometimes a mistake, sometimes at no fault of their own, things that happened to them, and just hear these tragic stories. Many of them served in the military, and you just hear these stories, and you go, "My gosh, if we only knew what God must be thinking of us at times to say." Here he was, a homeless, and he was our savior when they couldn't find a place to have him, even in a home, and he was born in a cave. And here, how much more as with all of the resources that we have as Christians, especially in this country, how we're all called to make a difference, young adults and all of us, to be honest with you, in general. And I just love how your ministry is purposeful about that. And I think in many ways it's a call to action, not only to young adults, but I would argue that it's a call to action to our church. That as a Christian church, I'm speaking universally now, not just specific, because many of our guests or many of our listeners are people that may not be associated with the Orthodox Church, but I think it's a call to action to the Christian church that we have got to. We gather on a Sunday, but we gather not to just stay gathered. We gather to go. We are called many times for us to get out of the church. That the church needs to get out of the church to make a difference in this world. And I love how your ministry is doing that. We just have a few minutes left of the show, and I want to I love how you're encouraging all of us to pray and to support. But I also would like to just kind of share from your perspective, Kyra, is that if there's maybe if there's a story that you could share with us about someone that you guys are impacting, or perhaps either or you, Michael. I mean, there's something that has just touched you to where you can share with us that just kind of takes us into the life of someone that's in need, that someone that's going through such a difficult time, and how a ministry like yours could make a difference in their lives. Either one of you that would like to just share first.
Well, I'll have Michael share first, given his, that he's worked so closely with the Neighborhood Resilience Project, one of our placement partners. Michael, do you want to share?
Sure. I was really moved. This is a story of Pascha, and I shared this with some folks who are, part of our OVC community. So in Pascha, the part of the service where we process outside of the church, and then the priest, comes and bangs on the door, and then we return back in.
Mm-hmm.
During that part of the service, we were gathered outside. When we first went outside of the church, there was this car that was, just playing some really loud music, right? And but they saw us come out, and we had the cross. We started progressing. They turned down the music, right? And then it was quiet. And then we continued to progress, and there was actually there was actually some gunshots. That was there wasn't right where we were, but there were some gunshots, and but we continued to progress, and we made it around to the front of the church, and we got up to the front, right about when Father Paul was going to bang onto the church door. This car pulled up, and a couple women jumped out, and one woman was really agitated, and she was walking around, and but she would come back, and then a couple folks from the congregation just went over to her and started talking to her for a minute. And so after a bit, then we all sort of went back into the church, and she came into the church, and there was someone who actually specializes in trauma counseling, and then had a conversation with her. And as it turned out, what happened was that her son had earlier that evening pulled a gun on her, and she had fled the home, and she wanted to come somewhere, right? And she saw us out front praying, and she said, "I want to be there," right?
Wow.
And so people prayed with her, and the remarkable moment of us celebrating the Son of God giving his life for us, even as another son was threatening the life of his mother, was so profound for us all. And the work of prayer and the work of being the church in that moment was so vivid. And if we at OVC can do our part to be the church, in however small of a way we can, in our little corner of the world, then that is a worthwhile endeavor, and we must do that.
Well, I am so grateful that you guys both have been on our show tonight. I just want to encourage all of our listeners, check out their website. It's orthodoxvolunteercorps.org. That's orthodoxvolunteercorps.org. And I also encourage you to check them out on their social media platforms. Again, I believe it's on Facebook and Instagram. Kyra, can you correct me if I just as far as where they can find you on social media?
Yep, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Excellent. Under the platform, under the name of Orthodox Volunteer Corps, correct?
Correct.
All right. And just, I just love what you both are leading. I know that you have a team of people that are behind you, and obviously Christ is guiding you in all this. But I love what you guys are doing. And however way in the future that our show can help in supporting your ministry, please let us know. But once again, to Michael Sider-Rose and to Kyra Limberakis, thank you so much for joining us on Live with the Lows.
Thank you so much, Father. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you, Father.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank Matushka Trudy for producing tonight's show, all the great people here at Ancient Faith for producing the show. We're honored to be part of the Ancient Faith family. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. And as we leave tonight, I just want to challenge all of you. Look at people, look at this world that we're in. And I know that you heard this show today, but let it also challenge you that whether you're a young adult or whether you're whatever age you may be, to just remember that the greatest value that we can do is to make a difference in this world, that Christ tells us that our faith without action is a dead faith. And so my challenge for all of you is to just look out tomorrow when you go to work or when you're out at school, to look for ways that you can share Christ's light and to make a difference in this world, because God is depending on us to do so. We also encourage you that if you're looking for some daily words of encouragement, as I mentioned at the top of the show, go to our website at thelows.com and click on the subscribe button and simply put in your email address. Next week, May 24th, we'll be speaking with a very dear friend of ours, Anne Bezari. This will be on our show, so you don't want to miss out on hearing from her. We just encourage you all to have a blessed day and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelows.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Lows on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Lows is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.
Are you curious about the Orthodox Christian faith?
Do you have questions about Orthodox Christianity?